Good day! Today we're going to discuss formative and summative assessments. Let me tell you what is meant by assessment. Assessment is the process of gathering and discussing information from multiple and diverse sources in order to develop a deep understanding of what the students know, understand, and can do with their knowledge as a result of their educational experiences. We have here a formative assessment, that is evaluations of someone's learning process in a classroom. A common formative assessment includes quizzes, games, projects, presentations, and group activities. Formative assessment work great when they're used on a regular basis. That regularity could be based on a calendar, maybe every Monday or every Thursday, etc. Or your lesson plans, maybe every unit. They're also more flexible than summative assessments. You don't always have to use pencil and paper to get feel for your students' progress. Instead, you can use in a class games, maybe a group presentations, a hands-on activities to evaluate student progress. Ultimately, the formative assessment you use are to come up with the results. After all, no one knows your classmate is better than you. So if you're referred to get an overview on how well your students are learning, you can use a group style assessment like a game. If you want to know where each student struggles, then you can now use individual assessment like a quiz. The flexibility is perfect for keeping students engaged in your class. It lets you stick on a syllabus while mixing up the exact task each student has to perform. That way, you don't fall into a predictable routine to teach a test or teach test. Instead, you have to vary routine to teach game, quiz, or teach representation project or another interesting format. By the time your course ends, you have a full understanding of how students are learning as you teach a subject. Then you can keep all your grades to look for patterns among different class sections. We have here a top 3 formative assessments sample. Formative assessments are excellent opportunity to let your students flex their creative muscles. Even if your student is not much as a writer or an artist, they can still have a little fun with this assessment. The first one is make an ad. If your student create an advertisement for concepts they just learned, use visual and text to really sell an idea. This makes the student apply what they have learned into a creative exercise, which helps with the long-term retention. The next one is the idea comparison. Instruct a student to lay out the main ideas of a new concept they learned. Then, have them compare that concept to another to see where they agree or disagree. In addition, in helping students remember this concept, this exercise makes them apply previous knowledge on a new format so they can remember it better in the future. And the last one is the misconception. For example, after you introduce a concept to students, introduce a popular misconception about it. Have a student discuss why the misconception is false and where it can have started. This exercise makes students think critically about what they just learned when showing them how to debunk misinformation. How do you track formative assessment? You can track formative assessment in one of 3 ways. First, you can track them by grade. This gives you a specific or concentrated view on how students or a group of students learn. On the downside, graded assessments are sources of strength for students. So if you want to make a unit fun or loose, graded assessment may not work well for you. Second, you can track them by feel. This is more based on the teacher instinct, allowing to pick which students need additional support based on your observation. On the downside, you can show or you cannot show this information to your administrators. If you have a certain standard to meet throughout a marking period, you won't be able to prove you fulfill this standard without grades. And finally, you can track formative assessment with student data. This is non-graded information that may reflect how your students are learning, such as questions they've frequently answered incorrect or subject areas where they had been trouble. After all, not everything has to be a grade. With all of that said and done, now let's jump to summative assessment. Summative assessment are evaluations of what someone has learned throughout a course. Common summative assessment include tests, final exam, reports, papers, and off-class projects. We have here 3 summative assessments. But before that, let me first tell you that summative assessment almost always takes place at the end of the course unless a teacher decides to break a course into more manageable chunks. They're often cumulative and they're used to evaluate a student's long-term information or information retention. In summative assessment like final exam, you can include questions from the first week or 2 of a course to ensure students retain introductory information. In other assessments like papers, your students can pull from full marking period of learning to apply to a topic. Either way, your students have to do something serious reflecting and critical thinking to bring together the information from one entire course. This is a great way to ensure students retain essential information from one course to another. So, if you teach introductory course, summative assessment are perfect to set students up to the success in the next classes. That's important because the student success in your classroom is just one step for them. When you prepare them for the next step, you make it easier for them to success in the future as well. In that way, summative assessments serve 2 purposes. First, they evaluate what someone learned while they're been in your class. And the second, evaluate how prepared someone is to go to the next academic level. Combined with the rest of the student's performance in class, summative assessments are excellent ways to gauge progress while ensuring long-term information retention. Now let's discuss the top 3 summative assessment examples. Summative assessments are traditionally more structured and standardized than formative assessments. Still, you have a few options to shake things up that go beyond the pen and paper test. And the first one is in-depth reports. Instruct students to choose a topic that resonated with them in class and report in depth on it. This is a great opportunity for students to take an idea and run with it under your supervision. This report may showcase the student interest, and you'll be able to evaluate the student engagement level in the class by how they approach the report. The goal is a passionate, intelligent, and comprehensive examination of a concept that matters to the student. The second is the cumulative individual projects. Have your students pick a project to complete. This project should somehow reflect what they've learned throughout the course. Projects are great for or any practical application class from health science to physics, creating a cross-section of the human heart, redesigning or designing a diet, or creating a protective egg trap vessel are all fun ways students can show off their knowledge of a topic. And the last one is the personal evaluation papers. Here, require students to apply principles from your class to the personal lives. These papers are excellent fit for psychology, nutrition, finance, business, and other theory-based classes. In a nutshell, personal evaluation lets students look at themselves through a different lens while exploring the nuances of the principles they learned in class. Plus, it lets students do something everyone loves, talk about themselves. Okay, now that you have a few ideas on the summative assessment, how can you track their success? When everyone has their own idea on this topic, grades are the best way to evaluate someone's success with a summative assessment. How you grade is ultimately up to you. Represents are great ways to grade someone based on a number of factors, including soft skill like public speaking. Written exam is a project-based assessment are ideal to see a student full scope understanding of the class after making period. Whatever you choose, stick to a consistent grading scale so you can identify your own strengths and weaknesses in the classroom as students complete your course. Okay, now what's more important? Formative or summative assessment? Many new teachers have this question. Are formative or summative assessment more important? You know, in a perfect world, they are equally important. Formative assessment lets students show that they are learning. Summative assessment lets them show that or what they have learned. So before I end, let me first give you this one. This is from Anida Davis, PhD. The primary purpose of assessment is to improve student learning.